For my project, I was interested in the determinants of healthcare coverage for children in the United States, and more specifically, how household characteristics could predict whether or not a child has healthcare coverage. I wanted to tie this into this larger literature on bargaining power and household decision making. So I looked at relative income, defined as mother's income over mother's income plus father's income, as kind of a measure of a woman's bargaining power in household to see how that could affect whether or not the children had healthcare coverage. And so I used what's called the American Community Survey, or ACS, as my data set from 2017. It's cross-sectional and representative of the entire United States. So kind of looking at this binary outcome of whether or not a child has healthcare coverage, modeling it in a frequentist sense, you don't say that just the probability of healthcare coverage is a function of all your indicator variables, but rather you look at the log odds or the logit of P, because this is a continuous function and you say that that is a function of all of your different predictor variables. So extending this to the Bayesian logistic regression is really similar to the linear regression, except you can see here, instead of saying that our data is normally distributed, it's now Bernoulli distributed as it's a binary outcome variable. And as I was saying earlier, instead of saying that P is a function of our different predictor variables, we say that logit of P, or the log odds, is a function of our predictor variables. And in running my model, I actually ran into some huge computational constraints. The ACS, even when I looked at individuals under the age of 18, because I wanted to see children, was an enormous data set. So I looked at a random sample of 3,500 observations when I actually ran my model. And so computational constraints were definitely one of my biggest problems, but I was able to still find some interesting results from relative income, showing that children were more likely to be covered in households where the mothers made a larger portion of the income. The largest drawback is I obviously was not able to find a causal relationship. I couldn't say that increasing women's share of total income would improve the chances that a child had healthcare coverage, but it's still consistent with the larger literature that found that increases in women's bargaining power and their spending amount improved their children's outcome more than increases in fathers' bargaining power did. And further studies could look to take advantage of some sort of exogenous shift in relative income in households to prove a truly causal relationship between these two different things.